Something strange kept happening to Alex. Every time the world grew louder, his own voice grew weaker. The noise was everywhere. His phone buzzed constantly with notifications, the streets outside his apartment were filled with impatient horns, and even when he tried to rest, his thoughts raced endlessly. Despite being surrounded by sound and activity, Alex felt empty, as though something inside him had gone silent. On the outside, Alex had a decent life. He worked in a stable job, had enough comfort to live well, and hundreds of people online to interact with. But deep inside, there was a restlessness he couldn't ignore. Every morning, he woke up to his alarm and immediately reached for his phone. Within minutes, he was scrolling through news, memes, arguments, and endless pictures of people smiling with their perfect lives. The hours slipped away quickly, and yet instead of feeling informed or connected, he felt drained and anxious. It was as if the noise of the world was slowly erasing his own sense of direction. His routine had become mechanical: wake up, grab the phone, drown in updates, rush to work, complete tasks, distract himself with entertainment, go to bed, and repeat. Days blurred together until weeks felt identical. Though he stayed busy, he could not shake the feeling that he was missing something essential. He was constantly connected but strangely disconnected from himself. The scariest part was realizing how much he had lost. Alex once dreamed of writing stories, exploring the world, and building something meaningful, but now those dreams seemed buried under layers of distraction. Whenever he tried to sit quietly, his mind demanded noise, as if silence had become unbearable. Without realizing it, he had traded his own voice for the voices of everyone else. One sleepless night, lying in bed with the city lights flickering through his window, a thought struck him like quiet thunder. What if the answer isn't in adding more, but in choosing less? What if what I really need is not more connection, but intentional solitude? That single thought, though small, felt powerful. For the first time in years, Alex sensed that maybe silence wasn't something to fear, but something to seek. And that realization was the beginning of everything. The next morning, Alex decided to test the strange thought that had struck him the night before. He left his phone on the table, resisting the urge to reach for it. For a moment, it felt unnatural, like forgetting a part of himself. His fingers twitched, his mind screamed for distraction, but he pushed himself out the door and walked toward the park near his apartment. The first few minutes were uncomfortable. Without his usual soundtrack of podcasts, playlists, or scrolling updates, the silence felt heavy. His mind started racing. What if someone needs me? What if I'm missing an important message? What if people think I'm ignoring them? The urge to turn back was strong. But Alex took a deep breath and forced himself to keep walking. Then, slowly, something shifted. With no phone in his hand, his attention moved outward. He noticed the sound of birds hidden in the trees, the gentle rhythm of his shoes brushing against the gravel path, and the cool morning air brushing his skin. For the first time in years, he was not multitasking or chasing noise, he was simply present. At first, this simplicity felt strange. He was so used to distraction that focus itself felt foreign. But as he kept walking, his breathing slowed, his shoulders relaxed, and a surprising calm began to rise within him. He realized how long it had been since he paid attention to the world around him without filtering it through a screen. When he reached a quiet bench in the park, Alex sat down and just observed. Children were playing in the distance, an old man fed the pigeons, and a jogger ran past with steady determination. These ordinary things, which he usually overlooked, now felt vivid, almost meaningful. He felt like he had stepped out of a storm into a still lake. For that 1 hour, Alex allowed himself to simply be. No deadlines. No comparisons. No distractions. Just silence. And in that silence, something powerful happened. He felt a small spark of peace he hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real. Walking back home, Alex carried that stillness with him. He understood now that solitude wasn't loneliness. Loneliness was emptiness, solitude was fullness. Loneliness drained him, solitude was beginning to restore him. It was the first step, and though small, it marked the start of a journey that would change the way he lived. After that first morning in the park, Alex felt something shift inside him. It wasn't a sudden transformation, but more like the quiet beginning of a new chapter. For the first time in years, he had tasted what silence felt like, and it left him wanting more. The calmness of that walk stayed with him throughout the day. He noticed he was less irritated by small things at work, more focused during conversations, and less desperate to check his phone every few minutes. Encouraged, Alex decided to make solitude part of his daily routine. Every evening, after work, he created a ritual. He would turn off his devices, put them in another room, and spend 1 hour alone with just a notebook and a pen. At first, this new practice felt awkward. The silence seemed too loud, and his mind jumped from one thought to another. He wrote random words, half-formed sentences, and questions he didn't know how to answer. A part of him wondered if he was wasting his time. But little by little, something remarkable began to happen. As the days passed, Alex found that his thoughts started to untangle. His handwriting became clearer, his ideas sharper. He rediscovered memories he had forgotten, dreams he had buried, and desires he had silenced. The act of simply sitting in solitude gave him space to listen to himself, and in that listening, he began to find clarity. One evening, as he wrote in his journal, a line flowed from his pen almost effortlessly: "The world will always make noise, but my peace is my choice." He stopped and stared at those words. It felt like a breakthrough, a truth that had been hiding in him all along, waiting for quiet to be revealed. That single sentence became his reminder that solitude wasn't about escaping the world but about strengthening himself to live within it. Over the weeks, Alex noticed another change. Ideas started flowing into his mind, new projects he wanted to try, creative thoughts he hadn't entertained in years. He remembered how much he once loved writing stories, and he began sketching outlines for short tales in his notebook. For the first time in a long while, he felt alive with possibility. Solitude gave him something distraction never could: clarity and creativity. And with each passing day, Alex began to understand that the silence he once feared was, in fact, the greatest gift he could give himself. Weeks turned into months, and what began as a simple experiment became a way of life for Alex. The daily practice of stepping into solitude had started to transform him from within. At first, the changes were subtle. He noticed he wasn't as reactive to small inconveniences, he listened more attentively when others spoke, and he no longer felt the constant urge to check his phone. But over time, those small shifts grew into something far greater. At work, his colleagues began noticing the difference. Alex, once easily distracted, was now focused and steady. In meetings, instead of rushing to speak or react, he paused, considered, and then contributed with clarity. His ideas were sharper, his creativity more refined, and his solutions more effective. People started seeking his input, not because he was the loudest voice in the room, but because his words carried thoughtfulness and weight. In his personal life, the transformation was even more profound. Instead of constantly seeking validation online, Alex became more intentional with his interactions. He chose quality over quantity, nurturing relationships that truly mattered and letting go of shallow connections that drained his energy. Friends began telling him he seemed calmer, more grounded, more present. Some even asked what had changed. His answer was simple: "I gave myself the gift of solitude." Perhaps the most important transformation was internal. Solitude gave Alex the space to reflect on what truly mattered to him. He realized how much time he had spent chasing things that didn't align with his values. Instead of saying yes to every request, he learned the strength of saying no. Instead of running after every opportunity, he began choosing the ones that fit his purpose. This shift gave him a sense of freedom he had never experienced before. Alex no longer feared being alone. In fact, he looked forward to it. Solitude became his sanctuary, a place where he recharged, reflected, and reconnected with himself. It wasn't an escape from life, it was preparation for it. The stillness gave him strength to face chaos with calmness, to handle pressure with clarity, and to live each day with intention. The man who once drowned in noise was now guided by silence. And in that silence, Alex discovered not just who he was, but who he was meant to become. Alex's journey into solitude was not about abandoning the world, but about learning how to live in it with clarity. What started as discomfort grew into discipline, and that discipline blossomed into transformation. He discovered that solitude was not a punishment or a sign of weakness, it was power. It was in those quiet hours with his notebook, during slow walks in the park, and in the stillness of his own thoughts that Alex rediscovered himself. The greatest lesson he learned was simple yet life-changing: loneliness and solitude are not the same. Loneliness is when you feel empty because you crave others, but solitude is when you feel full because you have reconnected with yourself. Loneliness drains you, solitude restores you. One leaves you searching outside, the other strengthens you inside. This truth began to shape every part of Alex's life. His mind was clearer, his decisions sharper, and his confidence stronger. He no longer lived chasing approval or comparing himself endlessly to others. Instead, he began to choose with intention how to spend his time, who to give his energy to, and what goals truly deserved his focus. The noise of the world still existed, but it no longer controlled him. He had found his anchor in silence. And this is where his story becomes your lesson. Maybe your life feels noisy right now. Maybe you wake up scrolling through other people's lives, or maybe your days blur together in endless tasks and distractions. Perhaps you, like Alex, feel a quiet emptiness inside, as if something important is missing. If so, remember this: you don't always need more noise, more input, or more connection. Sometimes, what you need most is to step away from it all and be alone, intentionally, purposefully, powerfully. Because solitude is not about escaping life, it is about preparing yourself to live it fully. It is in those silent moments that you will hear your true voice, rediscover your passions, and find the strength to walk your own path. And when you return to the noise of the world, you will no longer be lost in it. You will carry within you a silence that guides, protects, and empowers you. That is the power of intentional solitude.